Ever since the black book had given Zayn the money and the iPhone, his life had started changing. On the outside, everything looked normal. He still attended college, sat through classes, and spent time with his friends. But inside, he was constantly thinking about the book. Every time he unlocked the iPhone, he remembered the strange deal he had made. Every time he looked at the money in his account, he remembered the drop of blood he had given. The black book had never failed to keep its promises, and that was exactly what scared him. The next day at college, Zayn tried to focus on his lectures, but his mind kept wandering back to the same question. What exactly was the black book? Was it really magic? Was it cursed? Or was something else hiding behind those empty pages? No matter how hard he tried, he couldn't stop thinking about it. During lunch break, he sat beneath a large tree near the backside of the campus. It was one of the quietest spots in the college, far away from the noise of students. While he was lost in thought, his close friend Joshi walked over and sat beside him. She immediately noticed that something was bothering him. For the past few days, he had been acting differently. He looked distracted, nervous, and unusually quiet. At first, Zayn avoided her questions, but after several minutes of being pushed for answers, he finally gave in. He started telling her everything. He told her about finding the black book. He told her how he had written a wish for money and received it the next day. Then he told her about the iPhone and the strange price the book had demanded in return. The more he explained, the more unbelievable the story sounded. Joshi listened patiently until he finished. For a few seconds she simply stared at him. Then she burst out laughing. To her, the entire thing sounded ridiculous. She thought Zayn was making up a story to entertain her. According to her, there had to be a logical explanation for everything. Maybe someone had transferred the money. Maybe someone had secretly gifted the iPhone. There was no such thing as a magical notebook that granted wishes. The more Zayn tried to convince her, the less she believed him. In fact, she started teasing him. She jokingly asked whether the book could make her a millionaire or buy her a mansion. Zayn wasn't laughing. Deep down, he knew what he had experienced was real. The problem was that nobody else had seen it happen. Finally, after listening to his story, Joshi challenged him. If the black book was truly real, she wanted proof. Not stories. Not excuses. Actual proof. She told him to bring the book to college the next day. If it really granted wishes, she wanted to see it with her own eyes. The moment she said that, a strange feeling settled in Zayn's chest. Until now, the black book had only involved him. Nobody else knew about it. Nobody else had touched it. For some reason, the idea of bringing it to college felt wrong. Very wrong. The conversation with Joshi refused to leave Zayn's mind. Even after college ended and he returned home, her laughter continued echoing in his head. Every time he remembered the way she had dismissed his story, he felt annoyed. He knew the truth. He had seen the impossible happen with his own eyes. The money had appeared. The iPhone had appeared. None of it could be explained. Yet somehow, the more he tried to convince someone else, the more unbelievable it sounded. That evening, Zayn spent most of his time alone in his room. He tried distracting himself by scrolling through his phone, watching videos, and even playing games. But nothing worked. His thoughts kept returning to the black book. It had changed his life in just a few days. Before finding it, he was an ordinary college student worried about assignments, exams, and money. Now he was carrying a secret that nobody would ever believe. As the hours passed, another thought began bothering him. Maybe Joshi was right to doubt him. If he had never experienced any of this himself, he probably wouldn't believe it either. The story sounded insane. An empty notebook that granted wishes in exchange for strange payments sounded more like something from a horror movie than real life. The only reason he believed it was because he had lived through it. When night finally arrived and the house grew quiet, Zayn opened the cupboard where he had hidden the black book. For a moment he simply stared at it. It looked exactly the same as the day he found it. No glowing symbols. No strange markings. Nothing that would make anyone think it was special. It was almost funny how something so ordinary looking had managed to turn his entire life upside down. Slowly, he picked it up and placed it on his study table. The room was silent except for the ticking of the clock hanging on the wall. He opened the book and flipped through its pages one by one. Just like always, they were completely blank. Looking at those empty pages, it was hard to believe they had once demanded blood and a thumb. Hard to believe they had somehow made wishes come true. For several minutes, he sat there thinking. A part of him wanted to leave the book at home and forget about Joshi's challenge. But another part wanted proof. He was tired of being the only person carrying this secret. He wanted someone else to witness it. Someone else to understand that he wasn't imagining things. Eventually, exhaustion began to take over. Zayn closed the book, returned it to the cupboard, and lay down on his bed. Sleep came slowly that night. Whenever he closed his eyes, he found himself thinking about the next day. Thinking about Joshi. Thinking about what might happen if she saw the black book for herself. By the time morning arrived, he had already made up his mind. Whether it was a good idea or not no longer mattered. He wanted answers, and maybe this was the only way to get them. After getting ready for college, he opened the cupboard one final time, took out the black book, and carefully slipped it into his backpack. As he left the house and began walking toward college, he couldn't explain why, but a strange feeling settled deep inside him. It wasn't fear. It wasn't excitement. It felt more like the calm before a storm. The kind of feeling that appears right before something changes forever. The next morning, Zayn woke up feeling more tired than usual. He had barely slept the previous night. Thoughts about Joshi, the black book, and what might happen later kept running through his head. After getting ready, he opened his cupboard, stared at the black book for a few seconds, and carefully slipped it inside his backpack beneath a stack of medical textbooks. The journey to college felt longer than normal. Every bump in the road made him glance toward his bag. It was strange. The black book looked completely ordinary, yet carrying it around campus felt like carrying a dangerous secret. As soon as he arrived, he was reminded that there was an examination scheduled that morning. The entire medical college seemed tense. Students filled the corridors discussing anatomy diagrams, physiological processes, and important topics they expected to appear on the paper. Some revised notes right until the last minute, while others nervously questioned their friends about topics they had forgotten. Normally, Zayn would have been worried about the exam too, but today his attention was divided. While everyone else was thinking about marks, he couldn't stop thinking about the black book hidden inside his backpack. When the examination began, the classroom became completely silent. Rows of students bent over their answer sheets while invigilators slowly walked between the desks. For a while, Zayn managed to focus. He read each question carefully and began writing. The familiar routine of exams helped distract him from everything else. A few rows away, Joshi was also writing her paper. Once or twice she glanced in his direction and noticed that he seemed unusually distracted. Every now and then, his eyes drifted toward the bag resting beside his desk. The exam finally ended after what felt like hours. As students submitted their answer sheets, the tension in the room immediately disappeared. Conversations returned. Laughter returned. Everyone began discussing answers and arguing over questions they were unsure about. Zayn stepped out of the classroom and took a deep breath. The difficult part of the day should have been over, but for him, it was only beginning. As he walked through the corridor, he spotted Joshi leaning against a wall, waiting. The moment she saw him, a smile appeared on her face. She hadn't forgotten their conversation. She hadn't forgotten the challenge. And judging by the look in her eyes, she fully expected to expose his story as nonsense before the day was over. For the next few hours, both attended their remaining classes, but neither paid much attention. Joshi was curious. Zayn was nervous. By the time lunch break approached, both of them were thinking about the same thing. The black book, hidden silently inside Zayn's backpack, waiting for the moment would be opened in front of someone new for the very first time. By the time lunch break arrived, Both Zayn and Joshi had been waiting for this moment all day. Neither of them paid much attention to their classes after the examination, while other students discussed answers, made plans for lunch, or wandered around the campus. The two of them had something else on their minds. After the bell rang, they quietly left the crowded areas of the college and headed toward a place few students ever visited. Near the far edge of the campus stood a large, old tree surrounded by tall grass and a few worn-out concrete benches. It was peaceful, isolated, and far enough away from the main buildings that nobody would disturb them. Apart from the distant sounds of students somewhere across the campus, the area was almost completely silent. As they walked, Joshi couldn't help feeling amused. She was still convinced that the entire story Zayn had told her was nonsense. To her, this was simply an opportunity to prove that her friend had either been tricked or had convinced himself of something impossible. Every now and then she smiled to herself, already imagining how she would tease him once she proved that the so-called black book was just an ordinary notebook. Zayn, however, felt very different. The closer they got to the tree, the more uneasy he became. He had spent the entire morning questioning whether bringing the book to college was the right decision. Deep down, a small part of him wished he had left it at home. Yet another part wanted answers. If Joshi saw the book work with her own eyes, then at least he would finally know that he wasn't alone in this. When they finally reached the tree, both sat down beneath its shade. For a few moments, neither of them spoke. A cool breeze moved through the branches above them, causing the leaves to rustle softly. The place felt strangely peaceful, completely disconnected from the noise and activity of the rest of the college. Joshi looked at Zayn expectantly. She had waited an entire day for this. Meanwhile, Zayn sat quietly, staring at the backpack resting beside him. The black book was inside, hidden beneath his textbooks. Suddenly, taking it out felt much harder than he had imagined. After a long silence, he finally reached for the zipper and slowly opened the bag. His heartbeat seemed louder than the sounds around him. Carefully, he moved aside a few books and pulled out the black book. It looked exactly the same as always. A plain black cover, no title, no symbol, no markings of any kind. Nothing about it appeared special. Nothing about it appeared dangerous. Anyone seeing it for the first time would think it was a cheap old notebook. Joshi immediately leaned forward and stared at it. For a brief moment, the smile on her face faded. Not because she believed the story, but because after hearing so much about the book, seeing it in person felt strangely different. The black book rested quietly between Zayn and Joshi beneath the tree. For a few moments, Joshi simply flipped through the pages while trying to find something unusual about it. But the more she looked, the more ordinary it seemed. Every page was blank. The cover was plain. There wasn't a single thing that suggested the notebook was capable of granting wishes. A smile slowly spread across her face. She looked at Zayn and shook her head. The entire story was becoming funnier by the minute. Zayn simply sat back and watched her. He had already explained everything he wanted to explain. Whether she believed him or not was no longer his problem. The book had worked before, and he knew what he had seen. Joshi closed the notebook and laughed. According to her, the famous black book looked cheaper than most notebooks sold outside the college gate. Then she grabbed a pen from her bag. Zayn immediately understood what she was about to do. Before he could say anything, Joshi told him to stop making excuses. If the book was really magical, they could test it right now and settle the argument once and for all. She opened to a blank page and placed the pen on the paper. For a few seconds she thought carefully about what kind of wish she should make. Then her eyes suddenly lit up. That morning, both of them had written an examination. Perfect. If the black book was real, this would be impossible to fake. Without wasting another second, she began writing. She wrote that both she and Zayn should become the toppers of their class. She wrote that they should receive the highest marks in the examination they had completed earlier that day. If the wish came true, she would finally admit that Zayn had been telling the truth. After finishing the wish, she stared at the page for a moment before bursting into laughter again. Then another idea came to her. Since Zayn spent so much time talking about the book as if it were a living thing, she decided to have a little fun. Below the wish, she casually wrote a small introduction. She introduced herself to the black book and even wrote her name, almost as if she were meeting a new friend. After finishing, she dropped the pen onto the bench and leaned back confidently. The challenge was over. Now all they had to do was wait. For a few moments, nothing happened. The page remained exactly the same. Joshi immediately looked at Zayn with a victorious smile. The expression on her face practically screamed, "I told you so." But then something happened. The ink on the page began fading, slowly, letter by letter, word by word. The wish started disappearing, and for the first time since sitting beneath the tree, the smile on Joshi's face began to fade as well. For several seconds after the words disappeared, neither Zayn nor Joshi spoke. Both of them simply stared at the page. The wish that Joshi had written only moments ago was completely gone. There were no erased marks, no faded ink, and no sign that anything had ever been written there in the first place. The page looked as blank as it had before. For the first time since arriving beneath the tree, Joshi looked genuinely confused. She quickly flipped through several pages, checking whether the writing had somehow moved somewhere else. But every page was empty. The wish had vanished completely. Then, something even stranger happened. Right in front of their eyes, new words slowly began appearing on the page. Neither of them was touching the book. Neither of them was holding a pen. Yet dark letters continued forming one after another across the blank paper. The playful expression on Joshi's face slowly disappeared as she watched the message being written by an invisible hand. The first line read, "Deal accepted." A second line appeared beneath it, "Payment pending." Both of them leaned closer to the book. Their curiosity had completely replaced their laughter now. Joshi, who had spent the entire day mocking the black book, could no longer explain what she was seeing. Finally, the last line appeared. Look into each other's eyes for one full minute. For a moment, complete silence filled the space beneath the tree. Neither Zayn nor Joshi knew how to react. Out of all the possible things the book could have demanded, this was the last thing either of them expected. There was no blood, no strange object, no impossible task, just eye contact. A few seconds later, Joshi broke the silence by laughing. According to her, this had to be Zayn's idea. She immediately began teasing him, claiming that he had secretly written the message because he wanted an excuse to stare at her for a minute. The more she talked, the funnier she found the situation. Soon she was laughing so hard that even Zayn couldn't help smiling. The problem was that Zayn was just as confused as she was. He had no idea why the black book wanted this. Previous wishes had demanded real payments, a drop of blood, a thumb. There had always been a reason behind them, even if he didn't understand it. But this felt completely different. The whole situation felt ridiculous. Yet as the seconds passed, the laughter slowly faded. The conversation stopped. The teasing stopped. For nearly a minute, neither of them looked away. The breeze continued moving through the leaves above them. Distant voices from other students echoed across the campus. After several minutes of arguing, teasing, and trying to guess the meaning behind the request, curiosity finally won. Neither of them wanted to leave without knowing what would happen. It was only 1 minute after all. Nothing dangerous, nothing painful. Eventually, they agreed. Sitting beneath the tree, they turned toward each other and began looking directly into each other's eyes. At first, neither could take it seriously. Every few seconds one of them would laugh, causing the other to laugh as well. Later they both started looking into each other's eyes for a complete whole minute. That night, Zayn slept surprisingly well. The strange events beneath the tree stayed in his mind for a while, but eventually tiredness took over. The black book had accepted the wish, received the payment, and granted it. Everything seemed finished. Whatever the reason behind that bizarre eye contact request, nothing unusual had happened afterward. At least, that's what he thought. The next morning, Zayn slowly opened his eyes. For a few seconds, he simply stared at the ceiling above him. Something felt strange. The room felt unfamiliar. Still half asleep, he sat up and looked around. The walls weren't the same color as his room. The furniture wasn't arranged the same way. Even the curtains looked different. His first thought was that he had somehow woken up in the wrong room. Confused, He rubbed his eyes and looked around again. That was when he noticed a framed photograph sitting on a table nearby. It was a picture of Joshi. Zayn frowned. Why would Joshi's picture be in his room? The question didn't make any sense. He stared at it for a few moments before reaching for the phone lying beside the bed. The moment he picked it up, another confusing detail appeared. This wasn't his phone. He immediately recognized it. It was Joshi's phone. Now, his confusion started growing. Joshi's photograph, Joshi's phone. An unfamiliar room. None of it fit together. Trying to make sense of the situation, he stared at the black screen of the phone. Then, he froze. A reflection stared back at him. For a second, his brain refused to process what he was seeing. The reflection wasn't his. It looked like Joshi. His grip tightened around the phone. No, the word escaped his mouth almost automatically. His heart started racing. Quickly, he unlocked the phone and opened the camera. The front camera turned on, and the world seemed to stop. Staring back at him from the screen wasn't Zayn. It was Joshi. The same eyes, the same face, the same hair, everything. His breathing became uneven. His mind desperately searched for a logical explanation, but there wasn't one. This wasn't a filter. This wasn't a prank. This wasn't a dream. Somehow, impossible as it sounded, he was inside Joshi's body. Panic hit him like a truck. His hands shook as he searched for his own contact number. The moment he found it, he pressed call. The phone rang. Once, twice, 3 times. Then someone answered. Before Zayn could even speak, he heard crying. Loud, terrified, uncontrollable crying. The voice was shaking so badly that it could barely form words. But Zayn recognized it instantly. It was Joshi, and she was speaking through his body. For several moments after hearing Joshi's voice, neither of them knew what to say. The reality of what had happened was too overwhelming to process. Joshi continued crying on the other end of the call while Zayn stood frozen in the middle of the room that wasn't his. Everything felt impossible. A day ago they had been ordinary college students worrying about an examination. Now they had somehow woken up inside each other's bodies. Joshi, listen to me, Zayn finally said, trying to keep his own voice steady despite the panic building inside him. First, calm down. How can I calm down? Joshi cried. Zayn, I'm looking at your face in the mirror. This is your room. This is your body. What is happening to us? Zayn closed his eyes for a moment and took a deep breath. He was terrified too, but if both of them panicked, they would get nowhere. Listen to me carefully, he said. Don't tell anyone. Not your parents. Not my parents. Nobody. Joshi tried to speak, but her voice kept breaking. What if we're stuck like this? She asked. We won't be, Zayn replied immediately, even though he wasn't completely sure. This started after the black book. That means the black book is the only thing that can explain it. The moment he mentioned the book, both of them fell silent. Deep down, they already knew. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a coincidence. The black book had something to do with it. Do you still have it? Zayn asked. There was a brief pause. Then Joshi answered. Yes. Relief washed over him. Good. Bring it with you. What? Bring the black book. We'll meet at college and figure this out. For the first time since the call began, Joshi sounded slightly calmer. You really think it can fix this? I don't know, Zayn admitted, but right now it's the only lead we have. Neither of them wanted to stay where they were. Neither of them wanted to spend another minute trapped inside someone else's life. While remaining on the call, they both hurriedly got ready. Every simple task felt strange. Zayn struggled to adjust to Joshi's body, while Joshi found herself awkwardly moving through Zayn's room. The entire situation felt unreal. Yet no matter how much they wished it was a nightmare, neither of them woke up within minutes. Both left their houses. The call remained connected. Neither wanted to be alone. As they rushed toward the college from opposite sides of the city, one thought occupied both of their minds. The black book had granted the wish. But what if this was the real payment?